There is a version of you that was necessary for your past but may become an obstacle to your future. That version learned how to survive, how to seek approval, how to avoid rejection, how to stay comfortable, and how to operate within the limits of what was familiar. You should respect what that version did for you, but you do not have to remain loyal to it forever. Stop protecting the person you used to be because growth requires you to recognize that some of the habits, beliefs, fears, and behaviors that once helped you survive may eventually prevent you from becoming the person you want to become. Your old version is not necessarily your enemy. It may have been built from the circumstances you experienced, the lessons you learned, and the limitations you had at the time. Perhaps you became quiet because speaking created conflict. Perhaps you avoided risks because failure once hurt deeply. Perhaps you sought approval because rejection made you feel unsafe. Perhaps you accepted less because you did not yet believe you could demand more. These behaviors may have served a purpose once, but usefulness in the past does not guarantee usefulness in the future. The danger begins when you become emotionally attached to an outdated identity. You start saying, "This is just who I am," as though your personality were a permanent prison. You convince yourself that you are naturally undisciplined, naturally shy, naturally fearful, naturally inconsistent, or simply incapable of changing. Once you accept those descriptions as permanent truths, you stop challenging them. Your identity becomes an excuse. To outgrow yourself, you must question the habits you have normalized. Ask which behaviors are helping you move forward and which ones are quietly keeping you in the same place. Look at how you spend your time. Look at the people you repeatedly surround yourself with. Look at what you avoid. Look at the promises you make to yourself and whether you keep them. Look at what happens whenever something becomes uncomfortable. These patterns reveal the version of yourself you are currently protecting. One of the hardest parts of growth is accepting that comfort can become a form of resistance. You may know that you need to change, yet your familiar habits feel safer than unfamiliar possibilities. The old version of you knows how to operate in its current environment. The new version does not. That uncertainty creates tension. You may begin learning something difficult and immediately want to return to what you already know. You may start becoming more disciplined and suddenly feel tempted to relax your standards. You may establish boundaries and feel guilty because people are accustomed to your previous behavior. These moments are not necessarily signs that you are making the wrong decision. They can be signs that your identity is being challenged. You must also stop romanticizing your past simply because it is familiar. Familiarity is not proof of correctness. A comfortable routine can still be damaging. A familiar relationship can still limit you. An old belief can still be false. Your responsibility is not to remain loyal to every version of yourself you have ever been. Your responsibility is to learn from the past and carry forward what remains useful. This requires honesty rather than self-hatred. Do not insult your old self for making mistakes. Understand why those mistakes happened and what they taught you. Then make different decisions. Growth becomes easier when you see change as an upgrade rather than a rejection of your entire identity. You are not destroying yourself. You are refining yourself. You are removing weaknesses, strengthening abilities, and developing qualities that your future requires. This process can be uncomfortable because people around you may notice the difference. Someone who was used to you always saying yes may react when you begin saying no. Someone who knew you as inconsistent may question your new discipline. Someone who benefited from your insecurity may not celebrate your confidence. Do not let their expectations become your identity. You do not need to argue with everyone about who you are becoming. Let your behavior provide the evidence. Keep your promises to yourself. Improve quietly. Maintain your standards. Over time, the change becomes undeniable. The strongest transformation happens when you stop asking whether the old version of you is comfortable and start asking whether that version is capable of carrying the future you want. If the answer is no, change becomes necessary. Your past deserves understanding, but it does not deserve unlimited authority over your future. Take the lessons, release the limitations, and continue becoming someone your old identity would not have believed possible. Make discomfort your training ground, because the instinct to avoid discomfort can keep you trapped inside the same habits, abilities, and limitations for years. Most people naturally move toward what feels familiar. They prefer predictable routines, easy tasks, comfortable conversations, and environments where they already know how to succeed. There's nothing wrong with enjoying comfort, but comfort becomes dangerous when it becomes the highest priority in your life. If you always choose the easiest path, you rarely give yourself the opportunity to discover what you are capable of becoming. Growth requires resistance. You must sometimes enter situations where you are uncertain, inexperienced, challenged, or afraid. This does not mean deliberately creating unnecessary suffering. It means recognizing that productive discomfort is often the price of development. Think about learning any difficult skill. In the beginning, mistakes are unavoidable. You may feel slow, awkward, or incapable. Your mind may tell you that you are not talented enough. If you interpret that discomfort as proof that you should quit, you will never reach competence. But if you treat the discomfort as information, you can use it to identify what needs improvement. Every mistake becomes a lesson. Every difficult attempt becomes practice. Eventually, what once felt impossible becomes familiar. The same principle applies to confidence. Confidence does not come from avoiding situations that make you nervous. It develops when you repeatedly enter those situations and discover that you can handle them. If speaking in front of people makes you uncomfortable, practice speaking. If difficult conversations make you nervous, learn to communicate honestly and calmly. If taking responsibility scares you, accept reasonable responsibility and learn from the experience. You build confidence through evidence. Each time you face something difficult, instead of escaping, you provide your mind with evidence that you are capable of handling discomfort. You should also recognize the difference between productive discomfort and destructive suffering. Not every painful situation is something you need to endure. A toxic environment, abusive relationship, dangerous situation, or consistently harmful behavior should not be romanticized as a growth opportunity. The purpose of discomfort is development, not self-destruction. Choose challenges that expand your skills, discipline, courage, and understanding. Do not confuse pain with progress simply because both feel unpleasant. Another powerful form of discomfort is doing what you know you should do when you do not feel like doing it. Discipline often feels uncomfortable because the immediate reward of distraction is more attractive than the delayed reward of progress. You may want to keep scrolling instead of studying. You may want to stay in bed instead of exercising. You may want to postpone an important task because it feels difficult. Every time you choose the meaningful action instead of the easiest action, you strengthen your ability to direct yourself. Over time, discipline becomes less dependent on mood. You also need to become comfortable with being judged. When you change, some people may not understand you. They may question why you are working differently, setting boundaries, studying more, or pursuing goals they cannot see. If you constantly adjust your behavior to avoid criticism, other people's opinions will control your life. You do not need everyone to approve of your growth. Listen to useful criticism, but do not surrender your direction to every opinion. Discomfort also appears when you outgrow old identities. If you have always thought of yourself as someone who gives up easily, becoming persistent will feel unfamiliar. If you have always avoided responsibility, becoming dependable may initially feel demanding. Stay with the new behavior long enough for it to become normal. The discomfort is temporary. The capability you develop can remain with you for years. Train yourself to ask a different question when difficulty appears. Instead of asking, "How can I escape this feeling?" ask, "What is this experience teaching me?" That simple shift changes your relationship with challenge. You begin seeing pressure as an opportunity to practice patience, courage, discipline, communication, or resilience. You become less frightened by difficult situations because you understand that discomfort is not automatically danger. Sometimes it is simply the sensation of becoming stronger. Use it intelligently. Step beyond your familiar limits. Practice what you avoid. Accept reasonable challenges and allow yourself to struggle without immediately retreating. The person you want to become will often be found on the other side of the discomfort your old self kept avoiding. Break the habits that keep you small because your future is often limited less by what you cannot do and more by what you repeatedly choose not to change. Habits are powerful because they operate quietly. A single decision may seem insignificant, but when repeated every day, it becomes part of your identity, and eventually you stop questioning it. You simply say, "That is how I am." Perhaps you delay important work whenever it becomes uncomfortable. Perhaps you spend hours consuming entertainment while telling yourself that you have no time for your goals. Perhaps you constantly seek approval before making decisions. Perhaps you avoid difficult conversations, remain around people who reinforce your weaknesses, or repeatedly choose immediate pleasure over long-term progress. None of these behaviors necessarily destroys your future in one dramatic moment. Their danger comes from repetition. They quietly shape the direction of your life. To outgrow your old version, you must first identify the habits that support that version. Pay attention to what you repeatedly do when nobody is watching. Your private routines reveal more about your future than your public intentions. You may talk about becoming disciplined, confident, successful, or focused, but your daily behavior determines whether those qualities are actually developing. Start by examining the moments when you lose control of your attention. What usually happens before you procrastinate? What emotions appear before you reach for distraction? What situations cause you to abandon your standards? Understanding the trigger gives you an opportunity to change the response. You do not need to transform your entire life overnight. In fact, trying to change everything simultaneously can create temporary excitement followed by exhaustion. Choose the habits that have the greatest influence on your life and attack them through consistent replacement. If you waste your mornings, create a deliberate morning routine. If your phone constantly interrupts your concentration, remove unnecessary notifications and place the device away from your workspace. If you repeatedly postpone difficult tasks, begin with a small period of focused work instead of waiting for motivation. The objective is not perfection. The objective is to create evidence that you can behave differently. You should also understand that some habits are connected to identity. If you repeatedly tell yourself that you are lazy, weak, distracted, or incapable, your behavior may begin to conform to that description. Replace identity-based excuses with behavioral observations. Instead of saying, "I am lazy," say, "I have been avoiding difficult tasks and I can change that pattern." This creates room for action. You are describing a behavior rather than declaring a permanent identity. Your environment also matters. If you surround yourself with constant distraction, unhealthy routines, negative conversations, and people who discourage ambition, maintaining discipline becomes unnecessarily difficult. Change the environment where possible. Make productive behavior easier and destructive behavior harder. Put useful books where you can see them. Prepare your workspace before beginning. Remove obvious distractions. Spend more time with people whose habits encourage growth. You do not need to reject everyone from your past, but you should recognize whether your environment is supporting or weakening your development. Breaking old habits also requires accepting temporary discomfort. Your brain will often ask for the familiar behavior because familiarity feels safe. When you refuse it, you may experience boredom, frustration, anxiety, or restlessness. Do not interpret these feelings as commands. A craving is an experience, not an instruction. Let the feeling pass while choosing the behavior that serves your long-term goals. Every time you do this, you weaken the old pattern and strengthen the new one. There will be setbacks. Do not turn one mistake into an excuse to return completely to your old life. If you fail today, examine what happened, adjust the system, and begin again. Progress comes from returning to the standard repeatedly. The goal is not to become a completely different person through one dramatic decision. The goal is to stop feeding the behaviors that keep your old identity alive. When you consistently remove distractions, challenge avoidance, protect your attention, and keep promises to yourself, your behavior begins to change. Eventually, the habits that once controlled you become easier to resist because they no longer fit the person you are becoming. Raise your standards before life forces you to, because waiting for a crisis before changing can make growth far more painful than it needs to be. Many people tolerate weak habits, poor decisions, unhealthy environments, and mediocre effort until the consequences become impossible to ignore. They wait until failure damages an opportunity, until a relationship collapses, until their health suffers, or until someone else overtakes them before deciding that they must become more disciplined. But you do not need to wait for destruction to become serious about your life. You can choose higher standards while circumstances are still manageable. Your standards are the rules you repeatedly use to decide what you will accept from yourself and from the situations around you. If you constantly tolerate distraction, distraction becomes normal. If you repeatedly break promises to yourself, your own word loses meaning. If you accept poor treatment because you fear being alone, you teach yourself that your comfort is less important than keeping someone else satisfied. If you consistently submit weak work because you want to finish quickly, mediocrity becomes part of your identity. Raising your standards means deciding that certain behaviors are no longer acceptable, even when they are convenient. This does not mean demanding perfection. Perfection is unrealistic and can become another form of avoidance. High standards mean consistent effort, honesty, responsibility, and a willingness to improve. Start by examining where your current standards are producing results you do not respect. Look at your daily routine. Look at how you spend your time. Look at your work ethic. Look at the people you allow close to you. Look at the promises you make and break. Look at the excuses you repeatedly use. If the same problem keeps appearing, your standards or systems may need to change. One of the most powerful standards you can establish is keeping promises to yourself. When you decide that you will complete an important task, follow through. When you decide to protect your time, protect it. When you decide to stop a destructive habit, take the decision seriously. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen self-respect. Every time you repeatedly abandon your own commitments, you weaken confidence because your mind learns that your decisions are negotiable. You should also raise your standards for the people you allow to influence you. This does not mean demanding that everyone be perfect. It means paying attention to character, spend more time around people who respect your boundaries, encourage growth, communicate honestly, and take responsibility for their actions. Reduce exposure to environments that constantly pull you toward behaviors you are trying to outgrow. Your environment can either reinforce your standards or undermine them. Another important principle is to raise standards before circumstances become desperate. If you know that poor financial discipline creates stress, develop better habits before a crisis arrives. If you know that lack of preparation creates anxiety, prepare earlier. If you know that distraction is destroying your concentration, establish boundaries before an important opportunity depends on your focus. Prevention requires discipline, but it is usually less painful than repair. Raising your standards also changes how you respond to setbacks. A person with low standards can use failure as permission to quit. A person with higher standards treats failure as information. They ask what went wrong, what can be improved, and what must change before trying again. This mindset turns mistakes into training rather than identity. Do not announce your higher standards dramatically. You do not need to tell everyone that you are changing. Simply behave differently. Arrive prepared. Finish what you start. Speak carefully. Protect your time. Take responsibility. Refuse unnecessary distractions. Over time, your behavior becomes evidence of the new standard. The people around you may notice, and some may even resist because your new boundaries change what they have become accustomed to receiving from you. Remain calm. You are not required to return to old behavior simply to make others comfortable. Your standards determine the quality of the life you are building. If you consistently demand more discipline from yourself, better decisions become normal. If you consistently refuse to accept behavior that violates your values, healthier relationships become possible. If you consistently improve the quality of your work, greater opportunities become easier to handle. Raise the standard before the consequences force you to. Build discipline while life is calm. Strengthen your character before pressure arrives, and prepare yourself before the opportunity appears. The stronger version of you should not be created by desperation. It should be created deliberately through the standards you choose to live by every day. Become comfortable with being a beginner again, because one of the greatest obstacles to personal growth is the fear of looking inexperienced. People often want to appear intelligent, capable, and confident, so they avoid situations where they might make mistakes or expose what they do not know. They remain inside familiar environments because there they already understand the rules and can protect their reputation. But if you always need to feel competent, your growth will eventually stop. Every meaningful transformation requires entering territory where you are not yet skilled. When you begin learning something new, you may feel awkward, slow, confused, or even embarrassed. That feeling can tempt you to return to what you already know. Resist it. Being a beginner is not evidence that you are weak. It is evidence that you have entered a new stage of development. The person who refuses to be a beginner protects their ego but sacrifices their future. Think about how children learn. They fall, make mistakes, ask simple questions, repeat the same action, and continue without worrying about whether they look impressive. Adults often lose this freedom because they become concerned with reputation. They would rather pretend to understand than admit that they need to learn. This creates a hidden limitation. You cannot improve what you refuse to admit you do not understand. Humility is therefore not weakness. It is an advantage. When you can say, I do not know this yet, you create space to learn. When you can ask questions without feeling ashamed, you accelerate your development. When you can accept correction without becoming defensive, you turn mistakes into information. Starting again may also mean entering a completely different environment. Perhaps you were successful in one career, but now need to learn a new skill. Perhaps you were confident socially, but now must develop leadership abilities. Perhaps you were comfortable managing your own routine, but now face responsibilities that demand greater discipline. Your previous success does not guarantee competence in the new environment. Accept that. Do not expect your old identity to immediately function at a higher level. Give yourself permission to learn. The beginning may feel uncomfortable because your mind is accustomed to receiving evidence that you are capable. Suddenly, you are surrounded by people who know more than you. Instead of feeling threatened, study them. Observe how they think, how they solve problems, how they communicate, and how they handle mistakes. Someone else's competence can become a source of education rather than insecurity. Ask better questions, practice deliberately, accept feedback, repeat the process. Eventually, the unfamiliar becomes familiar. You should also avoid comparing your beginning with someone else's middle. When you start learning something new, another person may already have years of experience. Their speed can make you feel inadequate if you forget that they once stood where you are standing. Measure yourself against your own improvement. Can you do today what you could not do last month? Can you understand something that once confused you? Can you handle a situation with greater confidence? Those are meaningful signs of progress. Being a beginner also teaches patience. You learn that mastery is built through repetition rather than instant talent. This lesson can change how you approach every area of life. Instead of expecting immediate results, you become willing to practice. Instead of quitting when something feels difficult, you recognize difficulty as part of the learning process. Instead of protecting your image, you prioritize competence. There will be moments when you make embarrassing mistakes, learn from them, and continue. Most people remember their own mistakes far more intensely than other people do. What feels like a major humiliation to you may be forgotten by everyone else within days. Do not sacrifice years of growth to protect yourself from a few moments of discomfort. Faith can also help you accept new beginnings. You may not understand why your path has changed or why you are being placed in a situation where you feel inexperienced again. But a new beginning can be preparation for responsibilities you have not yet encountered. Trust the process while doing the work, learn patiently, practice consistently, and allow yourself to become capable. The beginner stage is temporary. What you learn from it can become permanent. Never let the fear of looking inexperienced prevent you from becoming excellent. Your ego may want to appear finished, but your future requires you to remain teachable. Start where you are, accept that you have more to learn, and keep moving until the skill that once made you uncomfortable becomes part of the person you have become. Build a new identity through repeated action, because lasting change does not come from simply imagining a better version of yourself. You can make powerful promises, create ambitious plans, and tell yourself that you are going to become disciplined, confident, focused, or successful, but your identity is ultimately shaped by what you repeatedly do. Your actions provide evidence about the person you are becoming. If you repeatedly avoid difficult tasks, your mind learns that avoidance is part of you. If you repeatedly keep promises to yourself, your mind learns that you are dependable. If you repeatedly face difficult situations instead of escaping them, you begin to see yourself as capable of handling pressure. Identity is not something you must discover once and protect forever. It can be developed through deliberate behavior. This is why small actions matter. One disciplined morning may not transform your life, but it proves that you can act differently. One difficult conversation handled with courage may not make you fearless, but it proves that fear does not have to control you. One completed task may seem insignificant, but repeated completion teaches your mind that you are someone who follows through. Over time, these pieces of evidence accumulate and begin changing the way you see yourself. The important thing is consistency. Many people try to create a new identity through temporary intensity. They become inspired, make enormous plans, change everything for a few days, and then return to old habits when the excitement disappears. Real transformation usually looks less dramatic. It is the repeated decision to behave according to your desired standards, even when you are tired, bored, distracted, or uncertain. You do not need to feel like the new person before acting like them. In many cases, action comes first and confidence follows. If you want to become disciplined, begin by keeping one small promise every day. If you want to become more confident, deliberately do things that require courage. If you want to become focused, protect periods of uninterrupted attention. If you want to become knowledgeable, study consistently. Your behavior becomes a training ground for your identity. You should also stop using your past as proof that you cannot change. Perhaps you have been inconsistent for years. That history is real, but it does not have to become your permanent identity. The question is not what you have repeatedly done until today. The question is what you repeatedly choose from this point forward. Every day gives you another opportunity to create new evidence. You should not expect your mind to immediately believe the new identity. If you have spent years doubting yourself, confidence may initially feel unnatural. Continue anyway. The brain learns through repetition. Eventually, the behavior becomes familiar, and familiarity reduces resistance. Your environment can help reinforce this process. Make your surroundings support the person you are becoming. If you want to read more, keep books accessible. If you want to focus, reduce unnecessary distractions. If you want to become healthier, make better choices easier to maintain. If you want to develop stronger relationships, spend more time around people who respect growth and responsibility. Your environment constantly provides cues that influence behavior. Use those cues intelligently. You should also understand that setbacks do not erase identity. Missing one day of discipline does not mean you are undisciplined forever. Making one mistake does not mean you are incapable. The danger is allowing a temporary failure to become an excuse for returning completely to the old version of yourself. When you fall, return quickly. Examine what caused the setback and adjust your approach. Progress is not the absence of mistakes, it is the ability to continue after them. Over time, repeated action changes more than your habits. It changes what you believe is possible for you. You begin expecting yourself to follow through. You become less dependent on motivation because discipline has become normal. You stop needing constant external approval because your own actions provide evidence of your growth. This is how a new identity is built, not through a single dramatic transformation, but through hundreds of ordinary decisions made consistently. Your future self is being created by what you repeatedly choose today. Every action is a vote for the person you are becoming. Choose carefully, repeat deliberately, and allow your behavior to gradually make the new version of you undeniable.